Welcome to the New York State Alternate Assessment, NYSAA Frequently Asked Questions webinar today. And I am Kylie, and I will be your Zoom support. And today's session is led by both Include NYC and the Parent Center of Western New York. So we're excited to have you all. Just a little bit about Include NYC. For more than 4 decades, we have been helping young people with disabilities, their families, and professionals. We have a variety of workshops, a helpline, and resources on our website, and I'll be adding that information in the chat box for you all. Just to note, we are in webinar mode today as we had a bunch of registrants sign up, which is amazing. So when you enter this room, your sound and video are off. But for the Q&A portion, you can use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen to ask questions. And if you have any technical issues or any thoughts, you can feel free to use the chat box. Just note, we might not be able to answer every question today, but we will add information in the chat box for you to follow up with any questions as needed. We also have subtitles in a variety of languages today, so to use the translated subtitles or ones in English, you can click those live transcript button in your Zoom webinar controls. I will pass it over to both Melinda and Teresa to get us started.
Thank you, Kylie. I'll pick up at this point. So good morning, everybody. My name is Melinda Burke, and I'm a family educator at Include NYC, and I am joined by...
Hi, everyone. I'm Teresa Veprek, and I am the program director for Parent Network of Western New York.
So let's begin with today. I just want to let you know who, I assume you might want to know, who are the parent centers? Well, we are a group of federally funded centers throughout New York State, and we are here to help young people with disabilities, their families, their professionals, and in whatever aspect of dealing with having someone with a disability that you might need. We are specialists in decoding special education systems for families, and we are here until the person with a disability turns 26 years old. We can help you navigate systems and provide resources and referrals. Our services are always free to families, and so please reach out to us early and often whenever you need us. Kylie, I know, has put some information in the chat for you, and throughout our presentation today, we will be putting up this link to help you find your parent center. But our presentation today should last maybe half an hour, and the rest of the time we are here to directly answer your questions. As we go along, feel free to put them in the Q&A, as Kylie said. But you should know that our presentation will give you a lot of information. So hopefully we will answer some questions as we go along. So what is NYSAA and how is it different from general assessment? Well, starting in 3rd grade in New York City, so at around 7 or 8 years old, all students in New York State have to take statewide assessments. The general assessments, depending on the grade your child is in, will be about a variety of academic subjects. Pretty much always math and ELA in grades 3 through 8, but then they'll also have some in science and social studies as they go through school. So for students with severe cognitive disabilities, there's a separate assessment, and it's called NYSAA, New York State Alternate Assessment. It's also based on academic subjects, but it's a modified version of the standards. We'll go into this a lot more as throughout our presentation today, but what you really need to know is that how a student is assessed is going to impact the diploma or exiting credential that they receive when they finish high school. And again, we will give you a lot more information on this. Okay, and obviously the diploma or credential that they receive will impact the rest of their lives as an adult. So this is in fact a hugely important topic. So who is eligible for NYSAA? Only students who have severe cognitive disabilities And there is a whole checklist that people at your child's school all have, and how you make the decision of whether a child should be assessed through standardized assessment or through alternate assessment. So, does your child meet all of these qualifications on the screen? In order to be eligible for NYSAA, they must meet all of these bullets. They have to have a severe cognitive disability and significant deficits in communication and language, and significant deficits in adaptive behavior, and need a highly specialized educational program focused on life skills as well as academics, and need extra support. And by the way, adaptive behavior does not necessarily mean the kind of capital B behavior problems that you might think of. It can mean that a student needs assistance with activities of daily living, like buttoning and zipping or feeding themselves, or they might need help with social skills, which could be something as simple as asking for help or telling someone they want to interact or play. So, as I just said, to be eligible for NYSAA, a student must meet all of the criteria. And here you go. If you need help understanding any of this, please contact your local parent center, and you can find us at this link that you see on the screen. And in the chat, you have further information. So, how do I know if my child is assessed or is going to be assessed using standard or alternate assessment? So when you go to your IEP, every time you will see a box like this that says participation in state and district-wide assessments. One or the other of these boxes will always be checked on your child's IEP. It can either say that the student will participate in the same state and district-wide assessments of student achievement that are administered to general education students, or the box will be checked that says the student will participate in an alternate assessment. And then, if that box is checked, it needs to identify the alternate assessment that will be used, which in New York State is always going to be NYSAA, New York State Alternate Assessment. And then there needs to be a statement of why the student cannot participate in the regular assessment and why NYSAA is appropriate. And this should not be a statement like Joey has autism or Susie has IDD and cannot take the tests. It needs to be a statement that says Joey needs modification to, it needs to be a much more detailed. I didn't create a particular statement here, but it needs to be very detailed and very particular to your child. And it needs to say why they cannot take the test and why NYSAA is appropriate to them. And that would be because they meet all the qualifications for NYSAA. So you should check that part of your IEP every year. And this is really important. Sometimes when you are in an IEP meeting, that section will be quickly glossed over or not discussed for time. That should never be the case, because even if your child is determined, let's say in third grade, to need NYSAA at that point, that doesn't mean they will always need it for every year throughout the time they're in school, or that they might not need it always in the same form. We'll discuss it much more as we go along, but it is in fact possible to have a child take a NYSAA assessment, say for ELA, and participate in standardized assessment for math. We'll go into this more, and if you need more help or more details, you can come to us at your local parent center, And this bigger link is one that will get you to where you can do research on this on your own. So, what do you need to know? I'm sorry, when do you need to know about NYSAA? That's the first step. And ideally, as soon as you realize that your child has severe cognitive disabilities, you should begin to learn about it. The information is out there and available even when your child is still in preschool. And as you go through school age, if your IEP or CSE team doesn't bring up how your child will be assessed, you should, and you should do it every year at the annual review. If you have more questions about at any time about how your child's learning is measured, speak up. Speak up to your IEP team. Speak up to your CSE team. Call your child's teacher. Call the principal, whatever you need to do. But be sure that you are addressing this every single year, because what a child needs as they learn and grow can change, just like everything else about a child. That's the when. Why do you need to know about NYSAA? We'll go into this in much more detail, but you need to know about NYSAA so that you know what the options are for assessing your child. You need to understand whether or not it is appropriate for your child. And as I said before, and as Teresa will be saying again, it is only appropriate for your child if they meet all the qualifications for it. You need to, if your child is qualified and does need NYSAA, then you need to ensure that your child is still making progress, and using the results of their NYSAA assessments is one way to monitor that. You need it so you can make fully informed decisions and find the most appropriate services, settings, resources, and support for your child, because a child who has a severe cognitive disability and meets the other qualifications for NYSAA will need different kinds of supports than a child who doesn't meet those needs, or even another child who does. And the other piece is that because NYSAA has such a serious impact on what your child will receive in terms of a diploma or a certificate when they graduate, it impacts what they can do as an adult and what they need for support. So in order to help set them up for their most successful and independent adult life, you need to be working on it from long before they are ready to leave the school system. And of course, you need to know all of this so you can meet the requirements and deadlines to apply to the various programs that can help your child. Okay? There's a lot of reasons you need to know about NYSAA. So, who at my child's school can help me understand this? Your first stop will probably be in the city, perhaps your parent coordinator or the special education administrator or IEP teacher at your school. And if they don't have the answer, they should be able to direct you to the right person. You can think about the IEP coordinator or the IEP chairperson, the principal or assistant principal, the social worker or school psychologist, the representatives of the CSE or the SBST that we have in the city, which is the school-based support team. And honestly, you can even start with your child's teacher. Go to the person you know, ask for help, and they will help you get there. And if you still have questions, of course, reach out to us. We are here to help you with that. Okay, so that was a bunch, and I'm going to pass the presentation now over to Teresa, who will continue from here. And then in not too long now, we will be ready to start taking your questions. Teresa, go ahead.
Thank you, Melinda. You'll be a tough act to follow. So Melinda talked a lot about what, New York State Alternate Assessment, NYSAA, is, but it's also important to understand what it's not. So NYSAA should never be used for a child, a student that doesn't test well, or whose, academic performance or performance on a standardized test might kind of bring down or lower the performance of a school or district. So that's not a criteria for being eligible for NYSAA. And if that's mentioned during your meeting with the CSE team or, school district or school administrator, it might be helpful to, have a copy of the list of qualifiers that students need to meet in order to be eligible for NYSAA to refer to. And make sure that, they're sticking to that specific list that's set by New York State. NYSAA also must only be considered for students, again, that meet all of the criteria. And only, this is kind of like a little caveat here, only after all options for support, accommodation, and modification are considered. So have they looked at the possibility of maybe a personal aid? Have they looked at accommodations by maybe providing additional instruction, and specially designed instruction, perhaps tutoring, modifying the content of the curriculum and academics being presented, providing them in smaller chunks, providing perhaps, note taker or, other forms of support that could help the student be successful in their learning environment. So this is something to definitely have a conversation with your school district or school team when you're talking about whether or not NYSAA is appropriate for your child or for your student.
Next slide, Teresa.
Yes, please. So there are also accommodations and language supports for NYSAA exams. And we have specific links on the FAQ document itself. And it's important if you are a teacher or parent or family member of a student who may be learning English as a new language or emergent English language learner, that it really is important to familiarize yourself with this portion of the FAQ document and the provisions for translation, because while the New York State alternate assessment, which is I think New York State uses dynamic learning maps, doesn't provide translated forms of the NYSAA. It's available in English only. An English language learner is eligible to have the text orally translated to them. That's their right as a student who is learning English. And for the written portion of it, they're also eligible to provide their responses in their native language, in their home language. So again, we have links about this in the FAQ document. And, once you've familiarized yourself with that, if you still have questions, obviously, talk to your school, but you can also reach out to your local parent center for more assistance. Next slide. So connection between NYSAA and the Regents exams. So as it stands right now, even though there has been talk about, changes coming up for Regents exams, everything is status quo for the time being. And it's important to understand how participating in the New York State alternate assessment is related to, Regents exams. So if your student or child is participating in NYSAA, that means that they do not have to take a Regents exam. And if they're not taking the Regents exam, that means that they would not be eligible for a diploma. So you're probably thinking, well, what about, if they're not getting a diploma, what are they? What are they getting? And that's something that we're going to touch on a little bit in one of the upcoming slides. But so sometimes there are students that participate in gen ed classes, and students with disabilities in gen ed classes, if they're able to take the Regents exams, as well as state standard assessments, then that's something that is their right to do if it's possible, and if they're able to. This is encouraged. It's important to remember that there are safety net options for students in New York State when they're having challenges passing the Regents exams that are required to receive a diploma. So if your child or student is in that category of having a struggle to, they've taken the math Regents once or twice, and they're still not achieving a passing grade. This is one of those times where I'd say definitely reach out to your local parent center and ask to talk to someone who's knowledgeable about transition and the Regents exams, and discuss what the safety net options are for your child or student, so that they can still exit high school with a diploma. Next slide, please. So if they are taking the NYSAA, though, how is that going to impact when they transition or leave high school? So if they're participating in the NYSAA, your student or child will not earn credits towards a diploma. They're working on a more modified version of the New York State curriculum. There's still academic components that they're working on, but again, this is a modified version and does not count towards earning a diploma. However, they do receive something called a Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential. And sometimes you might hear this referred to as a SAC certificate. And this is based on achievement of their goals that are stated in the IEP. But the important thing to remember is that this is different from a high school diploma. It is not a high school diploma. And since it is not, that means that they would not be able to use it as an adult if they were applying for admission and matriculation to a college or university. It can't be used to apply for military, and sometimes even employers that would require a high school diploma, the SAC certificate would not be an acceptable alternative. However, even though there are differences about what the SAC certificate and students that are participating in the New York State alternative assessment are eligible for as an adult, remember, it's still their right to receive high quality instruction, whether they're on the Regents track or if they are participating in alternate assessment instruction. And as parents and family members and caregivers, it's really important that we make sure to pay special attention to their IEP goals and those PLEP statements, and make sure that they're talking about the areas and skills that are going to be needed in order for them to be their most independent after leaving high school, so that they can participate to the fullest for living and employment and reach the goals that they have as an adult. Next slide, please. So when we say it's important to pay attention to those parts of the IEP that focus on goals that reflect their interests and what they want to accomplish as an adult, we're talking about the transition section of the IEP. And in New York State, when a student turns 14, it's required that the school work with your child on specific supports and transition skills to get them through this process. And that includes connecting them to agencies that are going to provide support to them as an adult with a disability. And this section of the IEP is actually titled Coordinated Set of Transition Activities. So when your child is approaching age 14, this section needs to be filled in. Many times we do see some school districts will start to work on future goals and transition type activities prior to age 14, and that's great. But again, as a parent, family member, professional, make sure that at the very least by age 14 that this is something that is being addressed at every CSE meeting. And again, just because it happens one time doesn't mean that, it can't change. If there are, interests and goals that your child or student, has changed over time, make sure that that continues to be updated as well in the IEP. Make sure that you also ask about pre-ETS services, and these are pre-employment transition services, and this is through Access VR. These are services that your child or student can take advantage of because they're available to students who are in high school and are between the ages of 14 and they're eligible all the way up to the day before their 22nd birthday because of FAPE 22, so the Free and Appropriate Public Education federal statute. And we're giving you lots of information today. And so if you feel like, this is a lot, how am I going to remember all this? Remember that we are here for you. And if there's, something specific that, you want to, talk about or learn more about, please reach out to your parent center and use the link that we've provided to find the parent center nearest you. Next slide. So there are other agencies besides us as parent centers that can help you get services to, help your child as they're getting ready to transition from high school to adult life. And it's really important. And we encourage you to, to get as much information and learn as much about these agencies as you can to support your child, not only after they leave high school, but, as they're getting ready to make that transition. So one of them that we mentioned before is Access VR, which is actually the Adult Career and Continuing Education Vocational Rehabilitation Centers through New York State. Much easier to say Access VR than to have to remember all of that. And remember, they're the ones that provide that pre-employment service. There's also independent living centers throughout New York State. They're very helpful with providing some transition supports and services as your child or student is getting ready to exit high school. And also continue to provide those supports and services if eligible as an adult. And then, of course, the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, or OPWDD. Many parents and families are are connected to services and supports through this state agency. Oftentimes getting connected, you know, at in preschool or early elementary school years. But even if your child or student is not connected, they can still apply for eligibility for office for people with developmental disabilities as a high school student or adult, if appropriate. And they can be connected to services and supports that will help them be successful and independent as an adult. And again, please reach out to your local parent center to get more information about the types of supports and services through some of these community-based organizations and agencies that are, you know, in your local neighborhoods. Okay, and we have referenced the New York State alternate assessment, you know, new and improved FAQ document that we've put together. And this is just a direct link to that document.
Okay. So we are now ready to start taking questions. I do want to add before we get into it, OPWDD has a new office called an Ombudsman program. So if you go to your OPWDD or your DDRO, the Developmental Disabilities Regional Office, which is your local office of it, the Ombuds program can help you explore all of that if you need it. So we are now ready to start taking your questions. We do have some in the Q&A, and I've noticed some things in the chat. We'll begin there. And as we go along, feel free to put more in the Q&A, either in response to what we say or anything more that occurs to you. When you get a chance to look at the document itself, it will have all of the links we hope that you are looking for. And of course, you can always call us more. But I'm going to open the Q&A now. And the first one I see comes from Danielle. It says, in the case that a student uses both methods of assessment, are they still forfeiting their diploma? So my answer to that would be, well, it's going to depend, because in order to get a diploma, a student has to have received in New York City, it's 44 credits, upstate, I believe it's 22. And they have to have completed a certain number and sort of standardized tests. There are what are called safety net options for a student who doesn't quite reach the standard qualifications. All of that is linked in the FAQ. And of course, you can always reach out to your parent center. Teresa, anything to add here?
Yeah, because this can be specific to where you live in New York State. So depending if you are, you know, a New York City resident or, you know, Western New York native, you know, definitely talk to your school, reach out to your local parent center so that you're getting the most accurate information about the credits needed and to exit with a diploma, and also the specific safety net options offered by your school. We can't, you know, emphasize that enough.
Yeah. Okay, Teresa, you want to take this one? It says, we're concerned about our teenager who's transitioning out of high school, especially without diploma, if they want to attend college or employment.
Right, so depending on whether or not they exit high school, whether they leave high school with a diploma. So some of the safety net options for some schools may offer a local diploma versus a Regents diploma. those options are different than the pathway that provides a high school exit with that skills and achievement credential certificate, that SAC certificate. If your child or student is on the path to exit with a SAC certificate, that would not be something that they could use to apply to attend college. Some employers will use that if the individual is also affiliated with an employment program. But this is something definitely, like, this is a great question, and I would definitely be, if it were me as a parent, I would definitely be having these conversations, like, with the, your child's teacher. And if they are currently working with a case manager, whether it be through OPWDD or Department of Health, this is a definitely great question to be talking to them about as you're mapping out a plan for what their adult life supports, programs, services are going to include, and what they will need to receive those programs and services.
Absolutely. And I would say, of course, reach out to your parent center. And you cannot use the SAC certificate to apply to a regular 4-year college, but there are various post-high school education options that might be open to a student who exits with a SAC certificate. So exactly as Teresa said, speak to your child's school, everybody you can find there, call the parent centers. It's a lot of research, but there is a lot of support out there for you. The next one says, does admission into a trade school or vocational school apply to students who obtain the alternate assessment diploma? So it, again, will depend on what is offered in your child's high school or how you have set it all up. Start by talking to your school, the teacher, the principal. Many students, oh, and I actually want to correct something. It's not an alternate assessment diploma. It's a certificate. Diploma is a word reserved for the actual New York State high school diploma. The SAC certificate, that's why when you get a certificate, you don't actually graduate, you exit the school program. There's different terminology set up for it, but there are levels of diplomas. And if, I don't know, but if your child is able to receive one of those diplomas granted by the safety net options that we've discussed, all of that is possible. So please talk it through in great detail with your child's school. Anything else, Teresa?
No, I think that was you covered all bases.
So the next one says, are OPWDD Access VR programs affected by federal funds?
Okay,
I
so
understand
this
your
is the
concern.
$1 million question. So right now, what we know is that OPWDD and Access VR are state programs. So they receive money from the federal government for state programs. So this is money that they have received and are able to, delegate out to the state. So this is, how often are they able to draw down funds from, the federal government? This is something like that I don't have access to answer. That's beyond my pay grade. But as of right now, it appears that based on the information that we have, is that services and programs to individuals with disabilities, which would include OPWDD and Access VR programs are not affected by the potential of the federal funding freeze. But this is something where, like, talk to your local parent center. And if this is something that concerns you too, this is something that you can talk to your local and state legislature about. Because if it were to affect programs, this affects your son or daughter or students' ability to achieve their goals and their dreams of what they want to do as an adult. And it definitely would affect the support in place that would make that possible. And when that happens, parents, families, and caregivers are affected. So every voice matters, every person counts, and we need to be vocal about this.
Absolutely. It is an evolving situation and none of us have the answers, but we are all concerned and all. And if your student or child is already involved with OPWDD or Access, go straight to them as well. They may have more information. Okay, Lisa says, please share the types of assessment tools used to qualify students for NYSAA. All of that is linked on the document, which is why I pulled this slide back up. We will be sending you this presentation and you'll be able to access the document directly. Oops.
And I think too, Melinda, that, when Lisa's asking about specific type of assessment tools, it's different educational organizations will use different evaluations to determine if a student meets all the criteria needed for NYSAA participation. So it's not that, like, it's not, that they have to use it's not that they have to use the Vineland for and that's an assessment used for to assess daily living skills or adaptive behavior. Some schools may use the Vineland, some may use another adaptive behavior assessment called the ABAS. So it depends on what your educational organization has access to. And again, the outcome, the result of that assessment, and how does it measure up to the criteria for NYSAA participation.
The next one I see actually is very related to Lisa's question. It says, is it enough for the parent to decide what type of assessment is the most appropriate for their child, or can the school team push back? So you are your child's parent, you know them very well, but the type of assessment, there is actually a checklist for helping school teams, IEP teams, CSE teams, make the decision as to whether a child is appropriately assessed through NYSAA. And it takes you through each step of the definition and how to do it, but it is not a hard and fast rule. There is no particular number that says, well, an IQ lower than this, the child needs NYSAA, an IQ above that, they need standardized. It is very much a child-centric, student-centric decision that can be addressed and changed every year. So as the parent, you obviously have a lot of input, but it is the educators who know the ins and outs of how the decision is made. So it is, like everything else on the IEP, a decision that you need to come to together. If there is disagreement among it, you'll try and work it out. You can access your due process rights for this if it comes to that. But before you get there, please work closely with your team and reach out to your parent center, and we'll try and help you through it all. So the next one says, how do I advocate for my child if the school wants him to take NYSAA and he is very, it's missing a word, very of getting a diploma with a few support. So I think maybe it sounds like he can do it. So Teresa? You-
I think this is a great opportunity to have a conversation with the CSE team or the student support team, depending on, where, what it's called, based on where your child goes to school. But also including your child, the student, in that discussion, so that those goals and interests about, what he or she wants to do as an adult are included as part of the IEP, and that there can be, connections to the supports and services that can make that happen. And again, we talked about that list of criteria that they need to meet. I would have that out and present as a parent or family member, and ask specifically, how are they meeting the criteria for this qualifier, and go through the list and make sure that, it's clear to you as a parent and caregiver, how your child is meeting the eligibility requirements for NYSAA. And did the school district do their due diligence to make sure that, those other modifications, accommodations, and supports were attempted before looking at NYSAA as the assessment path that, he or she needs to be a part of.
Absolutely. And as Teresa said, it is absolutely possible to have accommodations on state tests, and those can be very, very specific and there can be a variety of them that your child accesses. So, and supports it really importantly, if your child is going to need accommodations on a standardized test, they should also be receiving those supports in class so that they are used to them when they take the tests. This is an opportunity to speak up every year at your child's IEP. If you need more support, you can always get an advocate. You can come to us at the parent centers. There are many, many options. Well, I'll take back at least one of those many. There are options for a support system and for those safety net options for getting a diploma. And there are other ways to access them and to access all your rights in the process. So the next question says, how and who determines if the student has severe cognitive disabilities in order to be eligible for NYSAA? That is a conversation at your IEP meeting every year. You have the checklist, you have options, you have links on the FAQ document to help access that, but it is, as with everything, a team decision and a discussion. And that's very general, and of course, call us at the parent centers. The next one is New York City specific. If my child attends a non-public New York City school and the school is not providing us options for him graduating, what are our options to have him transition with a better future? You're in New York City, so please call us at Include NYC. We are your parent center, and we will be happy to have an hour-long conversation with you about where to go from here. Okay. The next one says the consideration of NYSAA eligibility as you've mentioned, should be done throughout the student's academic career. Should the IEP team use the state ELA math and science tests from elementary, middle school to assist in the decision-making? Are they reliable indicators? That's an interesting question. And are you saying if they've taken the tests and not done well with them, should they use it to assist in the decision-making? That could be a factor. How they perform on a given test could be a reliable indicator or not. You want to know that the student has all the accommodations and supports in place that they need to do their best on the test. I'm not really sure how else to answer this except to say, please call your parent center and they'll want more details and we'll try and talk you through from there. Any other suggestions, Teresa, on that?
I would refer back to the criteria for NYSAA, because when they're making that determination, remember that they're not supposed to be talking about how does your child perform on assessments that then reflect on our performance as an educational organization in New York State. The criteria for NYSAA, specifies that it has to be, that the assessments used to determine eligibility are reflective of whether or not the child has a severe cognitive disability. Those are psychological assessments performed by a, trained psychologist. When we're talking about, communication and language deficits, that's something that, is assessed by a speech language pathologist. Adaptive behavior. There should be components of this completed by the school district or the school, whether it's public or an agency school, for daily living skills, but also considering, how does the child or student perform in the home and community. So there's also a parent portion for adaptive behavior assessments. And then again, looking at if they're currently requiring that highly specialized programming, for daily living skills in addition to academics. So I would tread cautiously if performance on state assessments is being used to determine whether or not a student is eligible for NYSAA, because when you look back at the eligibility criteria, it's not referencing things that are determined by participating in like ELA and math assessments.
Okay. So says, can you please elaborate on the requirements needed to get the SAC certificate? Are there key ELA and math requirements that need to be met? There are no specific requirements for the SAC certificate other than having participated in NYSAA all the way through. So there's the NYSAA eligibility. There are no specific numbers for ELA and math for getting a SAC certificate. It's really that the SAC certificate is the alternative if your child is not eligible for a diploma.
And remember, the SAC is a certificate that shows that your student or child has achieved their IEP goals.
Exactly. Okay, when are the changes for Regents expected? How could it affect the special ed students currently in middle school? It's going to depend when they actually happen. They may happen as soon as next school year, but we don't really know. It will likely, whatever changes are put in place, likely will affect a child currently in middle school. So watch for more information. Oh. Why is it so hard to get approval for OPWDD? I received 2 denials already, even after sending documents they requested at our conference. It's very frustrating because my child has a need for these services. Yes, it is frustrating. I'm so sorry you're having such a hard time. Please get in touch with your local parent center and they will talk you through where you are, what is going on, and where you can go from here. I have heard that once you opt for NYSAA, it's difficult to go back to general assessment. Is there truth to that? Teresa?
Well, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. You should be able to make that determination for NYSAA every year. And again, might it be challenging to, like, once participating in alternate assessments, to go back to the pathway for a diploma to graduate from high school? Yes. But that doesn't mean that it's not possible. But definitely it would have to include very clear expectations about what is needed to move forward to exit high school with a diploma, and include conversations about the safety net options that are available to your child or student in order to get a diploma. And again, conversations also about accommodations and modifications to provide the support needed to your child or student so that, they can meet the criteria needed for a Regents diploma or qualify for the safety net options.
I will also add if your child is being assessed through NYSAA and you think there is a possibility for actually getting a diploma and taking standardized assessments, the sooner you get to that, the better, because the further along in their academic career they are, the less time they have to make up the tests and the credits that you need to qualify for a diploma. So it's not going to be easy. It can be done. And as Teresa absolutely said right at the start of her answer, it's an annual conversation. And just because something is difficult and there's pushback doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue it. Okay. It says oh no, we just did that. So it should not be taken alone as an indicator though, correct? And this is about the question of using standardized assessment performance to determine things. And the answer is correct. It should not be taken alone, but it can be part of the package. And I have to ask, it says you're Robert Brogan, but Roberta, is that you?
I think it is.
I think it is. Hi.
Then that's a great question because, it may be part of the conversation, but definitely it should not be a standalone reason for the school to be suggesting participation in alternative assessment. And again, make sure to have the criteria for NYSAA participation handy, because you need to have to be able to go through that list when you're having that conversation about, is NYSAA appropriate for my child? Nobody expects you to have it memorized. We have enough things as parents and family members to remember. Bring that list with you so that you can run through the list and ask those questions. Ask for data and information about how your child is or isn't eligible to participate in alternate assessment.
Absolutely. Okay, the next one says, at time of graduation, if my child is able to work a simple job, do most employers recognize the certificate, or will we have to go through a work assistance program that accepts the certificate as a minimum requirement? So whether or not employers recognize it is a case by case. If you, there is no, I am not aware of any work assistance programs that specifically require the SAC certificate. But it does, if that is the path that your child is on, you want to access VR as soon as possible. And that includes the pre-employment transition services program that Teresa discussed earlier. There's lots of information on the FAQ document about this. And of course, you can call your parent center and you should be in touch with the school as you go along. Okay, how would the NYSAA criteria change if New York State is planning to change the New York State diploma requirements? So far, that has not been addressed by the Regents Board because they also have jurisdiction over NYSAA. So I would say just stay tuned. We don't know of any changes coming in the NYSAA criteria, and I'm not sure that they will be planning that.
Yeah, I think the criteria, if you're talking about the criteria to participate in NYSAA, I'd bet the winning lottery ticket that that's not going to change because that's separate from the pathways to receiving a diploma. So when we're talking about the Regents, diploma requirements and the changes that are forthcoming, that's separate from the eligibility criteria to participate in alternate assessments.
Okay, so that's all I see in the Q&A right now, but there's a lot going on in the chat. Thank you, Jane, for putting the Ombuds program information in the chat. Can you be enrolled in Access VR and OPWD at the same time? Absolutely.
I saw something in the chat. Somebody asked about physical disability and medical
Oh, thank you.
complexity in addition to the ones that we mentioned. And again, so physical disability and medical complexity would most likely influence the outcome of things like communication and language deficits. And remember, significant deficits. They would also affect their daily living skills. Remember that if they're only, checking some of the boxes when we talk about that criteria list in order to be considered eligible for NYSAA, it's not just meeting some of the criteria, all of them. So they have to have severe cognitive disability and significant deficits in communication and language and, deficits, significant deficits in those daily living skills, adaptive behavior. And so it's all of them, not just a couple.
Yes. So just to sum it up, a child who has significant health issues may still be able to take the standardized test. So you need to have those conversations annually. In the chat, it says, what would be the outcome of a NYSAA participating student sitting for a standard state assessment in other content areas? That is going to depend upon which standard tests they take and how it all works out. It would be a conversation that you have and you have to follow very closely as the student gets older and is approaching either graduating or exiting from high school. And you would want to find out about the safety net options, because if his student is taking at least some NYSAA assessments, they might not reach the regular 22 or 44 credit threshold, but there are other options. So please speak with your child's school and of course call your parent center, and we will help you as much as we can.
I saw a question that asked if the alternate assessment requires the same degree of learning than the same state assessment, it says. But I think maybe they're referring to maybe like the pathways to diplomas. So if your child is participating in alternate assessments, remember this is a modified curriculum. So still high standards for learning, but again, same learning standards, but with modifications.
Mhm. Exactly. I see in the chat, someone asked how to find their parent center. That's the link that you see on many of our slides. You can go to parentcenterhub.org/find-your-center, and based on that, you will find your center. You live in Brooklyn, so your center is Include NYC, and you can contact us through the information that's in the chat.
Somebody popped a question back in the Q&A, and it says, is there a list of educational programs like colleges that accept the SAC certificate that we can share? So when you're talking about post-secondary education, colleges, universities, if a student has exited with the SAC certificate, sometimes there are programs like YALT that they can participate in, but that would need to be coordinated through their case manager, through if they're getting OPWDD services. So that's something to talk about with your school team when you're having CSE meetings, but invite your case manager, care coordinator to those meetings too, so that they can help to make sure that that information is available to you as a parent and caregiver. And so that also your child, your student has that information as well too, and you can make those plans for their future.
Okay. Oh, I see something new in the chat. thinkcollege.net. Thank you, Roberta, is an excellent place to start looking at college programs and see what exists for students with disabilities. Okay.
I know Paola Jordan from Synergia has been posting information in the chat as well. And they're an excellent resource for parents and families, and especially parents and families that are Spanish speaking. So please connect with them if you have questions.
Yes. Synergia is another one of the parent centers that helped create this FAQ document with us. And thank you, Paola. It's delightful that you are here today. What else? Oh, I see something new in the chat. Oh. Any other questions for the time being? We still have some time available. And let's see. Is there a special department in our parent center that assists with directions on transition to high school and the child has another impairment? It's going to depend on your parent center. At Include NYC, we do have a youth and transition team. But as for the particular disability that your child has, I expect that at most of the parent centers, they don't really arrange who helps by disability. But just contact whoever you need for yours, and you have the Find Your Center link here. Yes, in the Q&A, someone said, will there be someone at the fair this weekend to speak with about NYSAA? Yes, there will. This is a reference to Include NYC is having our first in-person resource fair in 5 years. We're very excited to be back in person. If you're in New York and can get to the Hudson Yards on Saturday, it's going to be, we're there from 10:30 to 3, and there will be about 70 vendors there who can help answer questions. And sure, we'll find you someone to speak about NYSAA. And Kylie will drop the information for that in the chat. Okay, can you revisit giving examples of special accommodations for general assessment? Okay, so you mean on the standardized tests? You can have accommodations on your standardized test that could include anything from frequent breaks to a scribe to help write the answers, to a separate location. There are many, many, many. On the document, you will see links that will get you to a list of appropriate accommodations or possible accommodations. If your child is going to have accommodations on standardized tests, it would be a really good thing for them to use those, have access to those accommodations in the classroom so that when they're taking the test, they're not also struggling through working a new system. For more specific questions, I would say check out the links that are on the doc, and of course, call your parent center and speak to your school.
And I did put a specific link for accommodations for testing for students with disabilities. That goes back to the New York State Education website. So hopefully that will provide some additional information. But again, like Melinda said, you know, touch base with your local parent center, and you know, because some things can be, you know, very specific to the, you know, your school district, or the types of state assessments that your child is participating in.
And Kylie will send the flyer for the fair along with the wrap-up email, so she's not going to drop it right in the chat right now, but you'll all have it. Okay, what
I
else?
wish I was in New York City. This fair sounds great, Melinda.
Come on down. My couch doesn't open, but you're welcome to stay there. Would anyone like us to revisit anything else? Have further questions about something?
I'm so glad we had, you know, great questions and participation from everyone today. Kept us on our toes.
It really has been a great discussion. I hope we've
Yes.
been able to at least begin to answer your questions about NYSAA and how it will impact your student. And I think I'm going to turn it back over to Kylie now.
Thank you all so much for joining us and for all your participation today. I did put our final evaluation poll up, and if you have a few moments to spare, if you could help fill this out, that would be great. And if you're on a smartphone or a tablet, you might just have to swipe over to the side to see the poll, but I'll leave this open for a few minutes. And I see all the wonderful thank yous and gratitude in the chat, so we appreciate you all being here.